Welcome, everybody, to the next episode of Tesseract Talks. This is where we put the spotlight on tech trends, and I'm your host, John K. Thompson. I'm an industry thought leader with over 4 decades of experience in data analytics and AI. I've worked at companies such as IBM, SAP, Dell, EY, and Gartner. So today, we're going to be discussing how AI agents change the risk landscape for SaaS applications and what that means for recovery, resilience, and protection strategies. For years, SaaS shared the responsibility model and where vendors have had a relatively clear division of where vendors provided infrastructure and customers were responsible for their data and understanding their data and workflows and protecting both of those. But with the rise of AI and AI agents and agentic workflows, that has really changed the landscape and how this data flows and where it lives and who's responsible for protecting it. And today we're going to talk to Rewind. James is the co-founder and chief product and technology officer of Rewind. So James, welcome to the show. Give us an introduction and tell us a little bit about you and your company.
Thanks for having me, John. Really appreciate it. So yeah, my name's James. I'm the Chief Product and Technology Officer here at Rewind. Rewind is a company that is designed to help protect your most critical SaaS business data. We've been around now for about 11 years, and we've been helping customers across all different market segments help make sure that their most critical data is safe and secure.
Great. Fantastic. Easy to understand. The SaaS shared responsibility model has worked well for many years, and people have understand it quite clearly. Companies provide infrastructure, I protect my data and workflow. But now with AI agents, we're introducing a very different operating model. From your perspective, what's fundamentally changed in the risk landscape?
I think a lot has changed. So you touched on the shared responsibility model and the importance of making sure that customers understand that it is their responsibility to protect their data. That model, in my opinion, is built on kind of some basic assumptions. It's based on the fact that humans are the ones that are taking action and changing things. Ultimately, humans are accountable for those actions that they're taking, and their impact, blast radius that they can actually affect across that data, it's kind of in proportion to how quickly they can work. And AI agents, they kind of break all 3 of those things simultaneously. They aren't constrained by speed. They don't have to really worry about judgment because they operate based on the context in which they're given. And they can touch, thousands of records and trigger all kinds of workflows that cascade, reassigning permissions, all in the same amount of time that it would take somebody to get up and go have their morning coffee. So that responsibility, I don't think it hasn't changed. It hasn't shifted in any way, but the consequences and the impact of not being prepared in those areas in which people are meant to be responsible in the shared responsibility model, they've really just amplified dramatically. And in my opinion, most resilient strategies and businesses, they just haven't really thought of that, and they haven't really caught up either.
Yeah. So that really points to speed, scale, breadth, depth of the impact that can be had. So as you said, if someone goes off to have their coffee and comes back and an agent has taken action, has touched, 10,000 records across 5 different systems, it's really hard for people to keep up with.
Yeah, incredibly difficult. And that's where things I think are really important around observability and your ability to actually recover when something actually does take place that you may not have expected.
Yeah. And I think that points to something in our second question. How does that really change operational risk? When we're talking about traditional human-driven workflows, I did something, I committed a record, I charged a customer, I backed out a transaction. Those are very easy to understand. You could okay, well, you did 10 actions and I got to undo 10 actions, or I have to undo 3 or 4 of them. But when you have agents doing something in an autonomous manner that are automated, how do you actually back that out? How do you even understand the breadth of the impact of that? How that happened?
Yeah, it's really funny, because when you think about how a human traditionally operates, there's this natural ceiling that seems to exist. You've got one person, they're operating within a single session. Usually they're operating with limited scope, but they also have unlimited context. They may not be thinking about something at the time that they start their work, but they can easily draw if they need to in order to achieve whatever it is that they're trying to do, right? And so the risk isn't really that you have an agentic workflow doing something that's subtly wrong. It's that it's doing it at scale for an extended period of time and nobody notices. So as an example, right? Like you may have an agentic workflow that changes your Jira instance for whatever reason, and your prompt, whatever prompt is driving that agent, may not be accounting for some edge case. And before you know it, you kind of realize that, I don't know, 50,000 work items are suddenly updated with incorrect values. And it's not that that happened maliciously. It was just a mistake in the way that the agentic system was operating at the time.
Yeah, I have lots of conversations. I've talked to, I think I'm coming up on 600 companies now that I've consulted with over the last 3.5, 4 years about AI. And, when you really get down to it, I think the concern that people have, the fear they feel is just what you said. Implicitly, you laid it out, is that it's not so much that the agent is off the rails. It's that they didn't consider the edge cases. They didn't think of the implications. They didn't think of a loop that it could get stuck in. So it's a design and implementation problem is really what it is. I mean, you have the incredible power of these agents. You really have to think through very carefully what they could do.
Yeah. When you're dealing with non-agentic systems, usually they're deterministic. Like it has a goal, but when it reaches an edge case it doesn't know how to process, it usually fails. And there's an opportunity to step in, evaluate, correct it, and resume. Whereas an agent, you give it a goal and it's typically just going to keep going until it accomplishes it, regardless of, what damage it may cause in its wake, which is kind of unsettling.
Yeah, it is kind of unsettling. And I think that's where many people have their reticence and their hesitation about AI and agents. So let's move on to our next question. So AI is with us, and I do have some interesting conversations with some older senior executives. They ask me, how long do I have to wait this out before AI goes away? Like, that's not happening. AI is here forever. So now we have generative AI, we have predictive AI, we have causal AI, and now we have agentic on top of all those foundational pillars. From a governance and a security perspective, what makes agentic AI, fundamentally different from traditional automation?
Yeah, I mean, I think we sort of touched on it, right? It's the goal-oriented aspect of agentic systems. Once an agent understands what its goal has to be, it typically will find a way in order to accomplish it within the guardrails of the context that you provided. And if those guardrails are in any way misaligned with what the final outcome and output, I guess, that you want of that agent, it can lead to all kinds of problems down the road. And this is where, things like what your recovery strategy, how that is built. And as I talked about earlier around businesses and how they're thinking about their resilience strategy really comes into play here. Because it's usually not a question of like, okay, I finally recognized that there's a problem here. Can I restore it? You need to kind of think to yourself, okay, like, how do I do that? And at what point in time do I need to go back to in order to correct this problem? And this is where when I talk to customers, I try and emphasize the significance of point in time recovery, the granularity of your restore capabilities, how you're thinking about that in the context of your agentic workflows. Because to me, now more than ever, this is like essential infrastructure for people to allow them to operate with agentic workflows and not really be scared of these consequences that seem to naturally come about as you're operating with these workflows.
Yeah, there was a white paper, discussion paper, research that came out last week from Google Cloud Platform, two of their architects. And it's almost like Back to the Future. I mean, what we've been implicitly talking about in many of this conversation is that in your agentic workflows, you need to checkpoint. You need to have areas where you're stopping, you're backing up, you're putting in points of recovery in your workflows. And when you're talking to people about AI, there's some kind of magical thinking that it's like, oh, well, it's just going to be able to recover itself, isn't it? Doesn't it do all that, as a part of the workflows? And my response is no. That's your responsibility. We still have to take care of, recovery planning and recovery time objectives. We need to put all the good information management practices that we've had over the last 4 decades into these systems. Just because we have agentic workflows that are kind of like microservices with brains That doesn't mean that they have the breadth and depth of knowledge that people have. People inherently understand that the systems must be recoverable, but agents don't. If you don't tell them that, they just don't do it, or you don't design it in. And then you have some of the disasters that we've been talking about here. So when you're thinking about, or how should organizations rethink their recovery time objectives at this point? Is there anything magical or different that they should be doing? Or is this just good old fashioned, intelligent design?
I mean, I err on the side of this is just good old fashioned intelligent design. It's a recognition that the risk profile increases dramatically because you are dealing with workflows that don't have boundaries around how long they can work. They don't get tired. They are simply goal oriented, and they will work to achieve their goal regardless of what the end result is across broader data sets. And I mean, you kind of touch on it, John, where if you're not thinking from the principles of shared responsibility from the get-go, you've been lucky, probably, in a pre-agentic world that you haven't had to deal with the challenges that come with that. But B, you're positioning yourself in a really bad spot, because the more that businesses are pushing towards agentic type systems, the faster they are going to come to the realization that not having a resilient strategy for their data in place, their most critical data especially, is going to cause them business disruption.
Yeah. And that leads us to, our final question of our session here today is, some companies have just been lucky, and that's a good thing. Lucky's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with it. But what is really going to separate the companies that are truly resilient, that have truly built this into their plans and have designed for unfortunate events, as opposed to those that have just been lucky? What do people really need to be looking out for, and how could they engage with Rewind to help them achieve those objectives?
I think the biggest difference is mindset. Many customers have the assumption that their SaaS data in particular is inherently safe because they think that the vendor is the one who houses that data, and therefore they are the ones who will be accountable if something happens with that data. And that is plain wrong. It's often very clear in terms and conditions, but you have to quickly shift out of that mindset and make the determination that for me to ensure that my most critical business data is safe and secure, that is something I need to worry about, regardless of whether it's Sarah in IT making changes or whether it's my agentic workflow. That data is yours. The workflows are yours, and the agents running on top of them are also yours. So resilience in this AI era, it means owning that responsibility with the same rigor that you would apply, to your own infrastructure. And this is where Rewind comes in and where we can help customers. SaaS resilience really is an infrastructure solution. We help businesses ensure that their most critical data is safe and secure and recoverable. Again, whether it's because Sarah made a mistake or whether it's because Sarah's agentic workflow made a mistake. And it's our mission to try and ensure that you can, recover and get your business operational again in the event that something does happen. And let me tell you, it inevitably will.
It will. It always does. It always, if it can happen, it will happen. We're all aware of that. So, James, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I actually, through this fantastic conversation, learned a lot about agentic recovery and checkpoint and things of that nature, which I'm usually pushing forward at light speed in the things I'm implementing. And often I don't think about these requirements. And I think I'm probably not unusual in that respect.
John, I really appreciate you giving me the space to share. So thank you.
James, it was great. So it's clear that AI agents are not simply another layer of automation. They fundamentally change the speed, scale, and complexity of operational risk in SaaS environments. So as organizations adopt increasingly autonomous systems, recovery planning, auditability, and independent resilience strategies become far more critical than many teams realize, even that I realize, honestly. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for sharing your insights. And thanks to all of you in the audience that keep showing up and watching our Tesseract Talks. We really are grateful for your attention and engagement. Have a great day, whether it's your morning, evening, afternoon, whatever it is. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining. Take care. Goodbye.